It was a crisp evening at one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, a place where sophistication and guest satisfaction were supposed to be the top priorities. The lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and chandeliers, creating an atmosphere that exuded exclusivity and high-class service. Alexander Carter, a well-dressed man in his late 50s, walked in quietly, wearing a casual outfit topped with a bright red cap embroidered with the slogan, "Restore America's Hope." He blended in like any other traveler. What no one realized was that Alexander wasn't just any guest. He was the owner of this prestigious hotel chain. Alexander had decided to make an unannounced visit to check on his staff and observe how the business was running when no one knew he was around. As he approached the front desk, he was met by a frown from the receptionist, Rachel Turner. Her gaze landed on his cap, and a look of disdain immediately crossed her face. What should have been a smooth check-in took an unexpected turn as Rachel, visibly irritated by the political symbol, decided to deny Alexander service. The situation escalated quickly when the manager, Andrew Hayes, got involved and supported her decision. Security was called, and Alexander was escorted out, all while he maintained his composure, hinting that this wasn't the last they'd see of him. Little did Rachel and Andrew know, the man they had just humiliated wasn't just an ordinary guest. He was their boss. Soon, they would learn a lesson they would never forget. Before we dive into this shocking story of arrogance, consequences, and redemption, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on what you would do in Alexander's shoes. Alexander Carter had always preferred to keep a low profile when visiting his properties. Despite his success as the owner of a renowned chain of luxury hotels, he never liked flaunting his wealth or authority. It was important to him that his business was run with a genuine focus on customer satisfaction, which meant observing his staff when they had no idea he was around. That day, he had chosen to visit one of his properties unannounced, dressed casually in jeans, a simple jacket, and his red cap, a symbol of his beliefs. Though never used to provoke anyone, it was simply a part of who he was. The lobby of the hotel was bustling with activity. Guests were checking in and out. Luggage was being wheeled across the marble floor, and the elegant chandeliers above bathed the room in a warm glow. Alexander walked in, taking in the sight with pride. This was one of his favorite properties, known for its exquisite service and attention to detail. He had worked hard to build this hotel chain from the ground up, and he was proud of what it had become. Approaching the front desk, Alexander gave the receptionist, Rachel Turner, a warm smile. Rachel was in her late 20s, with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. She was efficient at her job but was also quick to judge, and her biases often influenced her interactions with guests. As Alexander stepped forward, she glanced up from her computer, her eyes immediately locking onto the bright red cap he wore. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to thinly veiled disdain. "Good evening," Alexander said politely. "I have a reservation under the name Carter." Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in the cap, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "but we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone promoting divisive symbols." Alexander raised an eyebrow. He had not expected this. "I'm sorry. What?" he asked, keeping his tone calm. "I just need my room key. I'm not here to discuss politics." Rachel folded her arms across her chest, her expression hardening. "I'm afraid I can't check you in," she said firmly. "You'll have to leave." Alexander took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. He had dealt with difficult situations before, but this was different. This was his own hotel, and he was being refused service because of a cap. "Is there a manager I can speak to?" he asked, his voice still calm but with an edge of frustration. Rachel hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone and calling for the manager on duty. A few minutes later, Andrew Hayes arrived. Andrew was in his early 40s, a man who had been with the company for several years. He was known for being easygoing, often to the point of complacency, and rarely challenged his staff, preferring to avoid confrontation whenever possible. "What seems to be the problem here?" Andrew asked, looking between Rachel and Alexander. Rachel quickly spoke up, her tone defensive. This gentleman is wearing a Restore America's Hope cap, and I informed him that we cannot check him in. It's against our policy to allow symbols that could make others uncomfortable. Andrew glanced at Alexander, his eyes briefly flicking to the cap before he gave a small, dismissive shrug. I'm afraid she's right. Sir, he said, we're here to create a comfortable environment for all our guests, and that cap could be seen as offensive. We reserve the right to deny service at our discretion. Alexander felt a surge of frustration, but kept his expression neutral. He could see that neither Rachel nor Andrew had any interest in de-escalating the situation or treating him fairly. Are you seriously refusing me service because of a cap? He asked, his voice calm, but carrying a note of incredulity. Andrew nodded, his expression indifferent. We have to think about the comfort of all our guests, he said. If you're unwilling to comply, we'll have to ask you to leave. Alexander looked at both of them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You might want to think carefully about this decision, he said, his tone even. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet authority that neither Rachel nor Andrew seemed to notice. Rachel scoffed, clearly unbothered. Security will escort you out if you don't leave on your own, she said, her tone dripping with impatience. Alexander didn't argue. He simply turned and began to walk toward the exit. His posture relaxed, his expression calm. As he reached the door, he glanced back at Rachel and Andrew, giving them a small, knowing smile. I assure you, this isn't over, he said, his voice carrying just enough weight to hint at the consequences to come. Moments later, 2 security guards approached, and Alexander allowed them to escort him out of the building without protest. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. Disappointed that his own staff, people he trusted to uphold the values of his business, had treated him, and potentially other guests, this way. But he also knew that this was an opportunity to make things right, to ensure that his hotels were places where all guests were treated with respect, regardless of their personal beliefs. As Alexander walked to his car, he took out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. It was time to make a call that would change everything for Rachel and Andrew. They had no idea who they had just thrown out, but they were about to find out in a way they would never forget. The following morning, Alexander sat in his office at the corporate headquarters, reviewing the events of the previous night. His disappointment lingered, but his resolve to address the situation grew stronger. He called for an urgent meeting with the regional manager, Laura Monroe. Laura had been with the company for over a decade and was known for her ability to handle delicate situations with both firmness and grace. Laura arrived promptly, her expression calm but attentive. She took a seat across from Alexander and listened intently as he recounted the events at the hotel. When he finished, her expression hardened with determination. This is unacceptable, Laura said firmly. We pride ourselves on treating every guest with respect and professionalism, regardless of personal beliefs. Rachel and Andrew's behavior is a direct violation of our values. Alexander nodded. I need you to handle this personally, he said. I want a thorough investigation into their actions, and I want to ensure that this kind of behavior is never repeated at any of our properties. Laura agreed, promising to visit the hotel immediately. She knew this situation required decisive action, not only to address the specific incident, but also to reinforce the company's commitment to excellence. When Laura arrived at the hotel later that day, she wasted no time. She called both Rachel and Andrew into a private meeting. Rachel entered the room with an air of defiance, while Andrew appeared more subdued. Sensing the gravity of the situation, "Do you understand why you're here?" Laura asked, her tone even but authoritative. Rachel folded her arms. I assume it's about last night, but I stand by my decision. That cap was offensive, and I was protecting the comfort of our guests. Laura's expression didn't waver. Your job is to provide exceptional service to every guest who walks through these doors, not to let your personal biases dictate how you treat people. What you did was unprofessional and unacceptable. Andrew interjected, his voice hesitant. I realize now that I should have handled the situation differently. I made a mistake by not stepping in and ensuring the guest was treated fairly. Laura acknowledged his admission but remained firm. Mistakes were made by both of you, and there will be consequences. Rachel, Your actions have demonstrated a lack of judgment and professionalism that cannot be overlooked. Effective immediately. Your employment with this company is terminated. Rachel's face paled, and she opened her mouth to protest. But Laura silenced her with a raised hand. This decision is final. Your actions have jeopardized the reputation of this hotel and the company as a whole. Turning to Andrew, Laura continued. As for you, Andrew, you have been with this company for several years, and your track record has been commendable. However, your failure to lead in this situation is deeply disappointing. You will be placed on probation and required to undergo additional leadership training. Consider this your final warning. Andrew nodded, relief and regret evident on his face. Thank you for giving me another chance. I'll do everything I can to make this right. Laura concluded the meeting with a stern reminder of the company's values and the expectations for every employee. She then met with the rest of the staff, emphasizing the importance of treating every guest with respect and professionalism, regardless of personal beliefs or appearances. Back at the corporate office, Alexander reviewed Laura's report with satisfaction. The swift and decisive actions taken by Laura reassured him that the company's values were being upheld. But he also recognized the need for a broader initiative to prevent such incidents in the future. Over the next few weeks, Alexander and his leadership team implemented a company-wide training program focused on implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, and exceptional customer service. The program included interactive workshops, role-playing scenarios, and open discussions to help employees recognize and address their biases. Alexander personally attended the first training session at the hotel where the incident occurred. Standing before the gathered staff, he spoke from the heart. Our mission is to provide every guest with an experience that makes them feel valued and respected. This is not just a policy. It is the foundation of who we are as a company. Mistakes happen, but it's how we respond and learn from them that defines us. The staff listened attentively, many nodding in agreement. The incident had been a wake-up call, not just for Rachel and Andrew, but for the entire team. They were determined to do better and to uphold the values that Alexander had built the company on. In the months that followed, the changes implemented by Alexander and his team began to yield results. Guest satisfaction scores improved, employee morale increased, and the hotel regained its reputation as a leader in hospitality. The lessons learned from this incident resonated throughout the organization, serving as a reminder of the importance of treating every guest with dignity and respect. For Alexander, the journey had been challenging, but it reaffirmed his belief in the values that had guided him throughout his career. He knew there would always be obstacles, but he was confident that his team was stronger and more committed than ever to providing the exceptional service that defined his hotels. And for that, he was proud.